When we think of culinary medicine, few ingredients embody that concept quite like ginger. This versatile root with its delightful blend of sweetness and spice can be found in many different forms: fresh, dried, candied, pickled, in oil, as tea, or as a juice, even. Ginger is a staple in numerous cultures and numerous dishes, ranging from vibrant stir fries to comforting soups and invigorating beverages. Now, for some people's palates, that assertive flavor that ginger has can take a little getting used to, while others really cherish that distinct taste. But did you know that beyond its culinary charm, ginger really stands out as a superstar ingredient for addressing hypothyroid symptoms like sluggish digestion, brain fog, and weight gain? So in today's episode of Thyroid Healthy Bites, we're going to go on a journey through the myriad health benefits of ginger, uncovering how it can serve us as a supportive ally for those of us struggling with hypothyroid symptoms. Hello, Thyroid Thrivers. Welcome back to another episode of Thyroid Healthy Bites, a weekly podcast dedicated to helping you live well and eat well so you can feel well. I'm Ginny Mahar, your host and the face behind the apron at hypothyroidchef.com. Hello, Thyroid Thrivers. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk about one of my absolute favorite culinary ingredients, ginger. How can it support us as thyroid patients? And trust me, it can support us. It's absolutely a healing food. It's culinary medicine. It embodies that whole concept of food as medicine, maybe more than any other food. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the health benefits of ginger. We're going to talk about how ginger can help ease our hypothyroid symptoms. We're going to talk about how it can help boost our metabolism and energy. We'll also explore its impact on hyperthyroidism. So if that applies to you, we'll, touch on that as well. And then, of course, we'll talk about, cooking with ginger, fresh versus dried, what uses is it good for? What are some favorite recipes and ways to incorporate more ginger into your cooking so that you can enjoy some of the wonderful benefits that ginger has to offer. So I'll also highlight some, recipes featuring ginger. I've done a lot of these featured ingredient deep dives on the show and on the blog. And so this show, like a lot of the other featured ingredient shows I've done, does have a blog post that goes with it. So as we go through, if there's maybe any studies I mention, any sources, or maybe some of the recipes that we'll talk about later, if you're wanting links to those, I will put a link to the full blog post for this show in the show notes. You can go there and find all the links there for, everything that we talk about today. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started talking about the holistic health benefits of ginger, because ginger has this really long and ancient culinary history with a super wide range of applications. As a culinary medicine, ginger is probably most well known as a digestive aid, a nausea reliever, and an anti-inflammatory. It's similar in, many ways to turmeric. And it also, like turmeric, has very powerful antioxidant effects. The main bioactive and medicinal compound that's in ginger, which is also what gives it that, signature bite, is called gingerol. But there's other really cool compounds in ginger, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but shogal, which contributes to ginger's amazing anti-inflammatory properties. One kind of curious tidbit here is that ginger is in this family of flowering tropical plants that's known as, and again, these pronunciations, oh my gosh, okay, Zingiberaceae. Zingiberaceae. Okay, we'll try that. But this also happens to include one of our other most prized anti-inflammatory and medicinal thyroid superfoods, which is turmeric. It's also in that same family that I am not going to try to pronounce again. Ginger is frequently used in culinary medicine and in Chinese medicine. According to herbalist, acupuncturist, thyroid expert, and author Mark Ryan, he says that ginger promotes sweating. It's an antitoxin. It's a good antidote for seafood poisoning, which is one reason why it's typically served with sushi. He says it benefits the lungs and stomach, and it helps us expel pathogen. And he goes on to cite that ginger is, can be used as an arthritis treatment and a possible cancer suppressant. So very powerful stuff. Other research-backed benefits of ginger include helping us lower blood sugar and other diabetic risk factors, reducing menstrual pain, improving brain function, and fighting infection. So we'll look a little bit more at those as we go into, we're kind of going to zero in the lens a bit on, okay, those are the health benefits. How can it help us with our hypothyroid symptoms? So let's talk about ginger's role in helping to ease and relieve hypothyroid symptoms, because there's no doubt about it. Ginger is a culinary powerhouse for anyone eating to support their health. But what can it do for us as thyroid patients? Let's take a closer look. Ginger has several benefits that are going to help address some very common thyroid issues, like it's anti-inflammatory, it boosts metabolism, it supports weight loss, it promotes digestion, prevents constipation, stimulates bile flow, fights infections, improves brain function, and can help reduce cholesterol. But how much of an impact can it really make? Well, as it turns out, a pretty significant one. So recently, this was just in 2022, a study was published called Efficacy of Ginger Supplementation in Relieving Persistent Hypothyroid Symptoms in Patients with Controlled Primary Hypothyroidism. Now, that's a mouthful, but in simple terms, what the researchers were looking to see is if ginger made a meaningful impact on those pesky thyroid symptoms that medication often leaves behind. And they say, and they said in this study that, that applies to about 15% of us hypothyroid patients where we're still experiencing symptoms, even when we're being treated with levothyroxine or, some other thyroid medication, and we have a normal TSH. Now, my gut feeling is that that number is actually much higher. And I've had other sources on the show, like Dr. Antonio Bianco, who was on a few months ago, the former president of the American Thyroid Association. And I want to say he said, or at least maybe it was in his book. Anyway, I believe he said that that number was more like 20% of us. And I told him the same thing. I think that number is probably higher when it comes to those of us who are still experiencing symptoms despite being on medication, despite having a normal TSH. So how can ginger help those of us, and that's probably most of us who are here at Hypothyroid Chef. You're here because you're like, well, what else can I do? Because this one pill a day that's supposed to be solving all my problems isn't cutting it. And that is where, in my experience, personally and as a health coach and in, my functional medicine health coach training, that food and lifestyle aspect of thyroid healthy living can really help with that. So ginger, what can it do? Well, this study looked at 60 adult hypothyroid patients who were in that camp. They had normal TSH levels. They were being treated. And half of those 60 people were given 500 milligrams of ginger twice a day. And the other half of those people were given a placebo. And they found that in the ginger group, that group experienced what they called significant improvements in several textbook hypothyroid symptoms, including weight gain, cold tolerance, dry skin, constipation, memory loss, and concentration disturbance. That's what we thyroid thrivers often call brain fog, is that memory loss and concentration disturbance, and also dizziness and giddiness. I thought that was an interesting symptom that I don't know that I've experienced that one, but or maybe I haven't, connected that it's thyroid related, but gosh, there's so many thyroid related symptoms. It's honestly hard to keep count. I'd say the list is probably over 100 symptoms long, but these ones here that they looked at in the study are some of the most common ones, and they saw significant improvements in those symptoms just by administering 1,000 milligrams of ginger a day to these hypothyroid patients. They also saw outcomes improve in regard to BMI, body mass index, waist circumference, blood sugar, triglycerides, and total cholesterol. So big stuff here. While the study size was pretty small, we're only talking about 60 people, it was meant to gather preliminary data. And a lot of times studies are done that way. They want to gather the preliminary data to see, like, is this worth doing more studies on? And my hope is that those promising outcomes will hopefully warrant some larger studies. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But also, one thing to note here was that of the people who were in the ginger group who were taking the supplemental ginger, no adverse effects were reported. So that kind of highlights the fact that ginger is generally considered safe for most people, especially when it's used just as part of a balanced diet. So how does this apply to your cooking? Because, I don't know about you, that's my first question when I read stuff like these studies. It's like, well, how does that apply to me in real life? I'm not necessarily going to take supplemental ginger. I love to cook with it. Is cooking with it enough? Is a culinary dose of ginger, like, just kind of trying to make an effort to incorporate more ginger in my cooking, is that going to make a difference? Because that's what we're really all about here at Hypothyroid Chef, is incorporating those ingredients into delicious thyroid supportive recipes. So could those culinary doses of ginger be enough to yield similar results to what they found in the study? Well, what I learned is that it's difficult to really estimate like how much culinary ginger equates to ginger supplements, like the concentrated capsules. And in this study, they made their own concentrated capsules of pulverized and powdered ginger. That's what they administered. But still, if we look at it just strictly in terms of measurement, so 1,000 milligrams a day is what they were giving these patients. That's less than a quarter teaspoon. So not a lot. I think the takeaway is just that ginger is worth incorporating into your thyroid healthy diet. It's very powerful culinary medicine and a wonderful healing food, especially for thyroid patients. So when we consider thyroid healthy eating in the bigger picture, one thing that really stands out to me here about ginger is that two of our most primary goals when we're, doing what I call thyroid healthy eating is eating in an anti-inflammatory way and supporting our gut health. And ginger is just celebrated and prized and, in the spotlight and proven to very effectively help us do both, reduce inflammation and help support gut health. And best of all, ginger just tastes good. It's delicious. Hey, Thyroid Thrivers, Ginny here. I just want to pop in with a quick message that if you're listening to today's show and thinking, I'm ready to learn more about this thyroid healing journey, about what foods to eat, what foods to avoid, one of the best ways to do it is to sign up for my free thyroid-friendly grocery guide. This features over 130 delicious, colorful, nutrient-dense foods we can eat. So this list is gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, refined sugar-free, and free of processed foods. Because there can be a lot of emphasis, especially when we're starting out, on all that we can't have and all that we're supposed to avoid. But really, the purpose of thyroid-friendly eating is to incorporate more of the good stuff. So to grab your copy instantly of the Thyroid Friendly Grocery Guide, you can go to hypothyroidchef.com/grocery. I'll send you the guide and you'll also get put on my free weekly newsletter. So you'll get fresh recipes, you'll get updates on the podcast, you'll get personal notes from me, special discounts, and all kinds of goodies that I send out to my mailing list for free just once a week. So go ahead and grab that at hypothyroidchef.com/grocery. Okay, back to the show. My friend and fellow chef, Kate J., who is an AIP coach and nutritional therapist, says, I love using ginger in my AIP recipes. Not only is it a healing spice well known for bringing down inflammation, but it adds a decent kick to foods and drinks, both sweet and savory, because it's so warming. And it helps regulate our metabolism, which then has a happy effect on thyroid function. So that metabolic boost is something that a lot of us with underactive thyroids are looking for help with. We want more energy, we want better digestion, we want regular poops. And there's several reasons that ginger can help keep that metabolic engine humming and help us with those things. So let's next look at the ways that it supports digestion really throughout the digestive tract. Ginger can really help with our metabolism and boosting our energy. So back to Mark Ryan, that acupuncturist and thyroid expert and Chinese medicine specialist, he wrote the Hashimoto's Healing Diet. He explains that ginger can be specifically helpful to people with Hashimoto's because we commonly struggle with low stomach acid. And low stomach acid just makes it hard to digest our food, and that's going to make it hard to absorb and assimilate nutrients like vitamins and minerals from our food. And that can also affect bile flow. So he writes that ginger is the perfect remedy for both of these problems because it promotes the release of what's called gastrin, which is responsible for the release of stomach acid and also helps promote bile flow. So as the food moves past the stomach, ginger helps us like make waves in the digestive tract. So this is kind of an interesting concept. You know, you think of your digestive tract as like this passive tube, and it's really not. There's action happening in there. There's like this gastric motility that helps move the food through. And Caitlin Beal, who's a registered dietitian who has written some content for my Thrivers Club membership, says that ginger's good for constipation because it's prokinetic, meaning that it improves that gastric motility. So in other words, it just helps the food move through your digestive tract faster. Studies have shown that ginger also improves gastric motility by supporting gastric emptying. And that just means the emptying of the stomach. So we don't want food just like sitting in our stomach. We don't want it just sitting in our digestive tract. This is a source of a lot of gut issues for hypothyroid patients, is that slower digestion, constipation, low digestive juices, slow metabolism. Ginger can help with all of that. So overall, ginger's ability to stimulate digestive enzymes, reduce inflammation, speed up that gastric emptying, relieve nausea, promote gut health, and even it can provide anti-spasmodic effects for some people who struggle with that. Ginger can, collectively really contribute to and support our digestive health. When we digest better, we get more nutrients from our food, we metabolize better, our liver works better, our hormones are more balanced, our blood sugar is more balanced, we're less inflamed, our cells are happier, and together, all of that equals better health and energy for you. So all of that can come from ginger and be, helped along and supported by just incorporating ginger into your diet. This is why I love food. I love culinary medicine. I love cooking. I love healing foods. And I love what I specialize in as Hypothyroid Chef. It's so fascinating, isn't it? So I don't want to neglect those of you who were diagnosed, at least initially, with hyperthyroidism. What about that camp? Because while slow metabolism, slow digestion, and constipation are really common amongst hypothyroid patients, what about patients who are hyperthyroid? Is that gastric motility or a speedier metabolism or speedier digestion really something hyperthyroid patients want? Well, in some cases, maybe not. But first, we got to clarify a little bit of confusion here about whether we're actually hypo or hyperthyroid. Because many of us who start out in the hyperthyroid camp, diagnosed with hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease, or something else that's making us hyperthyroid, we end up eventually in the hypothyroid camp as we get farther along the treatment path. So, for example, just because you've been diagnosed with Graves' disease, which is typically manifests as autoimmune hyperthyroidism, that doesn't necessarily mean you're currently hyperthyroid, especially if you've been on that treatment path a while and you've maybe had radioactive iodine treatment or a thyroidectomy. As my friend and mentor Mary Showman puts it, most treatment paths eventually lead to hypothyroidism. So, maybe you started hyperthyroid and now you're hypothyroid. And that's a common source of confusion where people are like, wait, does this apply to me? And what I tell people is my content, my recipes, you know, everything I do basically is designed for people who are either, diagnosed with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, or people who are taking supplemental thyroid hormone for any reason, which kind of technically like puts you in that hypothyroid camp. All that said, if you are not that far along the treatment path, if you are actively in a hyperthyroid state where you're struggling with those hyperthyroid symptoms like weight loss, diarrhea, chronic hunger, and just other, signs and symptoms of just like an essentially over revved metabolism, you might want to use moderation with ginger just because of those metabolism boosting properties. So, a little bit in your meals, I personally wouldn't be worried about, but, just something to be aware of, talk to your healthcare provider about, and just want to be clear about that in case you're like, oh, I'm going to take ginger supplements now, or, I'm going to try to eat ginger every single day. If you're in that hyperthyroid state, it may have some unwanted effects. So just something to be aware of. Let's move on and talk about our favorite subject, cooking and cooking with ginger. So fresh versus dried, what are some ginger tips? Let's dive into that. So when we're talking about culinary use, ginger can be called for in a few different forms. Fresh ginger root, which is either grated or minced or sliced into coins. Ginger can be called for in dried or powdered form, or it can be called for in candied form. Now, candied ginger is like cooked down in a sugar syrup. It's coated in sugar. There's sugar in it. It should, really be used sparingly, like all sources of sugar, especially refined sugar. But I will tell you, it is really tasty. It is a star ingredient in my ginger basil chicken salad, which is one of our absolute household favorites in the warmer months. You can find that recipe on the blog. For thyroid healthy cooking, either fresh or dried ginger is more the ideal. I don't eat a ton of candied ginger, obviously, and I have tried to make that ginger basil chicken salad without candied ginger, and it just wasn't quite the same. So, sometimes you just got to weigh those things out, right? But yeah, fresh or dried ginger is, probably like the ideal for thyroid healthy cooking. Now, the drying process with ginger does create some, chemical changes, but both forms, fresh and dried, are going to retain plenty of health benefits. So whether you use fresh or dried ginger is mostly going to depend on what you're making. So dried ginger is typically used for baked goods, while fresh is used for savory dishes like stir fries and curries. So just like kind of a basic chef's tip or rule of thumb here is use fresh ginger for cooking, dried ginger for baking. That's not a hard and fast rule, but that's just kind of like the general norm, okay? To some degree, fresh and dried ginger can be used interchangeably, but they do have a different profile, like a different flavor profile, and they're going to have, of course, a different texture. So fresh ginger is really fibrous. It's got these long kind of woody hairs in it. So you can either remedy that when you're using fresh ginger, you can either grate it like across the grain. So that's gonna, finely mince those hairs. You won't notice them. Or you can julienne or mince it to just avoid those really tough woody bits in your food. But you just want to always be sure with ginger to cut it across the grain. And that's one reason why I think dried or powdered ginger is more preferred for baked goods, because that powdered form of ginger is going to mix more easily into things like batters and doughs. Dried ginger is obviously really easy to use. It has a long shelf life. It's easy to store, easy to measure, and it adds a really wonderful, aromatic sweetness to baked goods. Now, fresh ginger has a different flavor profile. It's brighter, it's more fiery on the palate. So while you can substitute one for the other, the flavor of dried ginger is not going to be quite as bold as fresh ginger. And the basic rule of thumb here when you are substituting is it's pretty wide. So if it calls for a quarter teaspoon of ground ginger, that equates to about 1 tablespoon of fresh ginger. So this is not even close to like a 1-to-1 comparison. And of course, that's true for, most like dried versus fresh herbs and spices. But yeah, a quarter teaspoon of ground ginger is equal to 1 tablespoon of fresh. Now, for beverages, you can use fresh, you can use dried, you can steep ginger coins in a little hot water, add a touch of honey. That can be a really simple fresh ginger tea. There's some really good, like I keep like a yogi tea. I think it's lemon ginger. That's one of my favorite, like just a dried pantry friendly ginger tea I keep on hand. That can be really sweet and soothing and spicy, nice if you have an upset tummy or something like that. Or you can keep a batch of my lemon ginger honey on hand. This is really easy to make. So you take a quart-sized jar and you layer slices of fresh ginger root and fresh lemon. So you just kind of alternate ginger, lemon, then you fill the jar with honey. Put the lid on, put it in the fridge, and let it cure like overnight. And that's just going to overnight, it's going to like the honey is going to draw a lot of the fiery flavors and those medicinal compounds from the ginger and also like a lot of the juice and flavor and goodness from the lemons. So what you end up with after about 24 hours is like a thin, I would say like a syrup consistency. And that's really wonderful to have on hand. I always keep it on hand during the winter. I actually just finished my most recent jar of it. But yeah, it can be taken by the spoonful for sore or scratchy throats. Just really, it tastes great. You can stir it into hot water and drink it as like a tea on its own, or add it to maybe a cup of herbal tea. So that lemon ginger honey is a really nice way to use it. Another way I like to use ginger is blending it into smoothies or like a fresh fruit juice. Like there's a recipe on the blog for a cranberry zinger that the primary flavors are, I use frozen cranberries. I take a whole orange, peel it, cut it into chunks, throw that in the blender. I slice up ginger, and then you can add ice. Sometimes I put some fizzy mineral water, which is really wonderful in there. It's almost like a fizzy cranberry ginger ale. It's so good. And again, like if you have a sore throat, that ginger and also the cranberries and orange just has like a really nice tartness and puckeriness and like this astringent quality that can kind of just help like clear and soothe the throat. Another drink I really love using ginger in is my golden milk tea. So I call it, it's like a easy instant golden milk mix. So I make like a concentrate with full fat coconut milk and lots of spices, including dried ginger, cinnamon, black pepper, all kinds of stuff. The recipe is in there. I sweeten it with honey, and then I freeze like portions of it so that when I want a cup of golden milk tea, I can just thaw one of those cubes in a mug, add hot water, stir it, done. So that's another really great way to get ginger in the form of like a beverage. A couple chef tips and hacks here for cooking with ginger. To peel ginger, what I do is give it a good rinse and then use the edge of a small dinner spoon to peel that like brown papery husk off. I know it sounds weird, and the thing is, you won't believe how much easier it is than basically any other way to peel ginger. I know it kind of blew me away, and it's definitely my favorite way to peel ginger. It's just the edge of that spoon. There's something about that just, because ginger is like knobby, it comes in that sort of awkward shape, and can be a little bit tricky to peel. But yeah, the edge of a spoon works really well. If you've never tried it, give that a try. Another hack that I love for ginger is, ginger keeps pretty well. I'd say it keeps for probably at least 2 weeks in the vegetable drawer when you bring it home from the produce section. But one thing I do to make sure I always have some fresh ginger on hand is I keep it in the freezer, and then it'll keep for, 2, 3 months. And the really nice thing about having some frozen ginger in the freezer is if you end up running into a recipe that calls for grated ginger, it grates so beautifully if it's frozen. Now, if it's fresh, ginger can be a little bit hard to grate. And my favorite tool for grating is my microplane zester. That just works really well for like grating little things like that: ginger, onion, garlic, of course, zest, obviously. But because ginger has those long, like fibers in it, when it's fresh, it can be a little bit hard to grate. The fibers don't grate through, it kind of like gets clogged. It can take a long time. That zester or grater, it'll like cut right through those fibers. It just grates really beautifully when it's frozen. So that's just kind of like a nice option for, recipes that call for grated ginger. How about a few other thyroid-friendly recipes featuring ginger? On the blog, you'll find a recipe for my ginger scallion meatballs that have a miso carrot dipping sauce. Oh my gosh, my mouth just kind of watered because this is one of my favorite recipes. And it really has this like 1-2 punch with the ginger because there's a bunch of ginger in the meatballs, and then there's also ginger in that miso carrot dipping sauce that is like kind of based on like a Japanese steakhouse dressing. I could seriously drink it. It's so good. It's such a good dip or salad dressing. So both of those, it's kind of like a two-for recipe there. Also, the ginger basil chicken salad I mentioned earlier that uses the candied ginger, the lemon ginger honey I told you about. I also have a recipe on the blog for egg roll in a bowl. It's a thyroid-friendly version, so there's no soy in it. It uses just like whole food ingredients and no like major processed food ingredients. That's really great and ginger heavy. Another ginger heavy recipe that I absolutely love is my red lentil rainbow soup. It's like got this really nice spice, color, so many nutrients in that. Another soup that features ginger is my creamy carrot coconut soup. Now, this soup is a little bit more like refined and elegant. It's blended, so it's really velvety, and it's this beautiful bright orange bisque type soup that features, carrots and ginger and coconut milk and all kinds of other yummy stuff. I also use ginger in my Thai chicken soup. So in that one, the ginger is like sliced into coins, and then it just really infuses the chicken bone broth that is the base of that soup. It's so good. It's like such a quick and easy one, that Thai chicken soup. I love that on like a Tuesday night because it comes together so quickly. Everybody loves it. It's so warming and nourishing. I also mentioned that cranberry zinger, any kind of smoothie. Oh my gosh. If you've never tried fresh ginger root in a smoothie, please do. It's so good. I have been absolutely hooked on this for like the past month. And now when I make smoothies, if there's not fresh ginger in it, I'm like, oh, it's not the same. It just adds such a nice zing. And it goes especially well, I would say, with tart flavors. So maybe some of those frozen cranberries, like the orange, those are really great flavors. I've been adding it to smoothies made with frozen huckleberries. We had a really good huckleberry year last year, and me and my family went out and picked probably a gallon of huckleberries. And now, like, it's spring, we're already coming up on the next berry picking season, and we had all these berries in the freezer. So I've been making smoothies with those, with fresh ginger and the fresh huckleberries that are like so sweet and tart. And oh my gosh, so, so good. I have another recipe on the blog for a brown rice salad with shrimp and avocado if you do grains. So that's got some ginger in it. My friend Kate J, who I mentioned earlier, contributed a recipe for a wonderful spiced AIP fruit crumble. So that's just a really nice AIP dessert that's got, plenty of ginger in it. And then Phoebe Lapine also contributed a recipe for butterless butter chicken. So, so good. Oh my gosh. And that also has ginger in it. So many recipes to choose from. Again, you'll be able to find the links for all of those, all the sources, and everything else I mentioned in today's episode in the show notes for this post, I'll link you to that. So if you're like, oh, I want to make that lemon ginger honey or whatever it is, you can go right there and grab the printable recipes off the blog or whatever other information you wanted from today's show. All of that will be written up in the complete blog post. So to wrap it up today, ginger can be really helpful for us as thyroid patients as an anti-inflammatory food with really high antioxidant properties. In addition to just countless healing properties, ginger can help aid digestion, boost metabolism, and combat constipation. Really common struggles for those of us with hypothyroid symptoms. So it's clear that ginger is worth a place in your thyroid healthy kitchen. For hyperthyroid patients, however, you might just want to be aware of some of those metabolism boosting effects with ginger and, use it in moderation to avoid some of those stimulating effects to digestion. Look, it's not like ginger is like a laxative. At least I've never experienced it that way. I think you'd need to consume a lot of it to have that, but just something I want to mention and be aware of, because I know, not all of us are in the same like diagnosis camp here. But as thyroid thrivers, just getting to know these featured ingredients can really inform our food choices and help support our health ultimately. So I thank you for spending this time with me today, for coming on this deep dive with me into this delicious and spicy world of ginger with me. I love doing these deep dive explorations on featured ingredients because I think they really help us understand and embrace the power that food can have for us. So I hope that you've enjoyed getting to know some of ginger's powerful healing potential as a food. And I hope that this has inspired you to try some different ways of incorporating it into your cooking. All right. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. You take in just a couple minutes to do that after you popped off the show on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Spotify, whatever it is. If you wouldn't mind doing that, it really makes such a huge difference in supporting the show. So I really appreciate that, and thank you in advance. I'm Ginny Mahar, your thyroid health and cooking coach, wishing you happy cooking, happy thriving, and the best of health. I'll see you next time.